Thank you, Nicole, for accurate intro. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight on a Sunday night. So I'm going to show, three chapters actually. One about practice, academia, maybe quickly, and then more like a research project, as Nicole explained, in relation with the city of Paris and the Grand Paris project. In terms of places, most of what I'm going to show tonight is between, not between, but either in Paris or in Sydney, most of them. So let's start. I was talking to some people last night about how architects start working and how you get to meet clients, public or private, and sometimes I did the same thing. You wait for competitions, or you wait to meet clients, or you go out in clubs to meet the right people, and also you can have self-generated projects. And so the first project I'm going to show, that was the studio in Sydney. That's where it started 10 years ago, actually. 10 years ago. And when you don't know anyone, you're not part of the networks, and so you had plenty of time to actually walk around the city. And for some of you who were here last night, Paul was actually describing how walking on the street is sometimes generating ideas, and you don't need a client, you don't need anyone to actually put things together as a project. So it's an old project, tiny old project, but that's where it started. Walking along these streets in Sydney's suburbs. And actually, so it's a typical little cottage, workers' cottage in Sydney. And you've got this long house with a tiny front yard where usually nothing happens. The social life is at the back of the house, and it's more like a dead space with garbage bins and shit everywhere, pretty much. Excuse my French, but it's true. So I was thinking, hey, that's actually that could be interesting to how to activate or reactivate this place actually, which is between the private home and the public space of the street, and nothing happens. And Australian people are so nice and friendly. Well, that's weird. Maybe we can do something here. So the first project, I told you it's an old project. Look at the colors. I can't believe I've done this. But anyway, the point was to develop a tiny little object, furniture, where people are able to sit and lay down or read, incorporating incorporating garbage bins, letter boxes, the door, all in one, to give more, to redefine this space and where people can interact a bit more. And first project, it's been published, won an award there, and that's how I managed to get started in the business over there. So with no clients. Other versions. You're going to think what is it doing actually? There is no specific order or dramatic tension in the way projects are organized tonight, in the way they go one after another. But so it's not chronological, it's not necessarily by scale or whatever, but it's also, I'm sure some of you understand this, that's where and how projects come to you, in a weird way. Sometimes it's about a design project, sometimes it's a show, sometimes it's like this. So it comes in your face just like that. The city of Sydney, a couple of years later, invited me to organize curate and design an exhibition with a kind of like, you say carte blanche, that when it's like carte blanche about the topic. You're late. No, I'm sorry. Nah, I'm a lecturer as well, so it's like, it's a joke. With the topic about climate change and very different type of projects, actually inviting like artists, designers, architects from like all over the world and presenting a specific project in relation how climate change doesn't change necessarily, like not the typical approach about climate change, but how it does affect a design practice actually. And so I'm going to go quickly about this. That's beautiful customs house in Sydney. And architecture could be also about like communicating about the topic, not necessarily designing much. The design part was this, and creating a little like home cinema or, not home cinema, but private cinema, where actually you can see the project. So the point wasn't necessarily to design that much, but also like, to communicate and curate about a specific question. And that's something I'm trying to like tackle each time. That means even for a small project, architects most of the time are defined by like we need to give an answer or solve a problem, and that's true. But also it's also generating questions about the discipline and talking about architecture like we do tonight. I think it's already a project. So thank you, Malta Design Week. So that's because it's a project also to bring people together. The further to the last night's talk about like how you actually occupy a space, the body within a space, and so sometimes you're invited for like a performance or exhibit something as part of a collective exhibition that was also in Sydney. I'm going to skip this because it's not the key point. A few years ago, I got commissioned for 2 fashion shows actually, and that's what I like actually, like exploring the periphery of the field of the discipline, and it's also talking about people, events, actions, body, space, time, movement, and light as well. So this fashion show, of course with a like super tiny budget and 24 hours to set up the project, was actually the question was how to occupy like a runway as an architect, and how to organize, curate the movement of models. Good evening. Curate the movement of models, organizing the like lighting system, and how actually the lighting system can construct the space and hold the space together and guide models throughout this stage. And so what I'm showing here is like these like diagrams of lighting scripts that you're going to understand a bit more. So we've got these like poles, lighting poles, organizing the way models are going to move within the space, so they can be turned on and off or with a gradient, and that was organizing the space. I mean, that was the idea in general, but with a small budget, it becomes something a bit more like smaller, but that's fine. The year after, same place, same show. So it's difficult sometimes to, no, it's not difficult, it's fun actually, to that kind of iterative process of redoing what you've done, but in a very different way. And the question was about this idea of like fashion, and fashion shows are like dated in a bad and in a good way, and something which is so old, and that was also like thinking about how you communicate about like fashion and in general. So it's more like, do we need to go to a fashion show to understand what a garment is? No. So it's more like through screens actually, and like phones or computers that you through images. So was really interested like to play with this idea of having like a real-time show, and also this kind of image which is going to be communicated through screens, and how to simultaneously have like the real-time show and the screen effect. So that was by simply like constructing around the runway these like 4 screens where actually there is always that kind of disappearance of the model. So anyway, that's clear. And also with the screen creating some kind of like not time lapse, but like delay in time. So, and also like tweaking image or pixelating the image, or having that kind of like visual distortion of the model. That's pretty visible on this one. And the physical model disappears. So that was the key idea of the show. $15,000 for this. Pretty reasonable. Fees included. I know, yeah. So, competitions, shelter. This one is in Paris. The city of Paris were organizing a competitions for homeless people, migrants. And part of the brief was, okay, it has to be able to fit anywhere in the city. Maybe for like 4 months, maybe for a year, maybe for 2 years, and then it has to move according to the land, like the free land. If, for instance, there is like a parking lot which is available for 2 months, the shelter is going to be there, and then move on a rooftop of a warehouse, for instance. So it was a bit tricky developing that kind of strategy to do whatever they want, wherever they want, for how long they want. So, so I started to actually think about the design process, which is able to be like minimal in terms of impact, but also very versatile and very like responsive to a context, adaptive, and also responsive to any kind of program. Because they were not only bedrooms or dormitory, but also offices and a workshop, and I added like other programs to it. So developing something which is between the hexagon and the sphere. Hexagon for its connectivity in terms of geometry, and the sphere for its like structural integrity and simplicity. So and testing also like replication patterns, how they can get organized together. Starting to like simulate how they could be spatialized and built, and with a specific like assemblage for this one, we can see the different programs with the different colors, and also that could be like this, and then 2 months later that could be like this. So it has to be able to be reorganized pretty much constantly. And so that was in a specific site on the. Anyway, you don't know the site, so what's the point? So it's a section of the project of these like spheres, we are like working together with the like winter garden as well, so that like people actually it's trying to not only like shelter people but bring communities together. It's a cliche, but it's nice as well when it happens. And also having people living around, being able to grow stuff or buy plants, and that means there is kind of visibility as well instead of purely charity. So that's yeah, that speaks for itself. These like not see-through but translucent assemblage of kind of like finally like complex geometries which are inflatable. It's kind of like inflatable double skin structure, and all this fits in one truck, a big truck, but one truck. Another competition in Paris. Won the competition, not built. Thanks, guys. Which is I'm sure some of you know the area, center of Paris, like a massive transportation hub called Les Halles, which is actually the busiest train station in Europe. And there is this gigantic network of like roads, underground tunnels, and so because just lately it's been like reorganized, and this exit or entry to a tunnel was a leftover suddenly, and the city of Paris like sent a brief. Okay, guys, you need to design, like cover this and design a garden. I'm not like a landscape architect, but I was thinking that's a shame to actually like get rid of this natural topography, which is like part of maybe it's not very sexy, but that kind of like history and layering of Paris from the 70s, when like cars were like the stars of the show, and the project was like keeping that kind of ramp, creating a sunken garden, which was perfect because the streets are like super busy. That was anyway, won the competition, unbuilt. I'm going to go quickly, but like there are lots of projects about like politics and architecture, or architecture as the expression of power or political power. And so I care about Australia, and Australia has policies about migrants which are like very tough, zero migrants. And it's a rich country, big country. I was a bit angry about it and feel ashamed, to be honest. And so I produced this image, which is actually if nasty architecture was actually embodying nasty policies. Next. No one wanted to publish the image. I don't know why. Installation in Sculpture by the Sea, Sydney, you know. And so the show is about it's a pretty big exhibition. Like 500,000 of people go there like in a month, and this is kind of like open, beautiful landscapes, like typical like Sydney beaches. And I was interested in actually developing a notion of like interiority in such a like open space. And paradoxes, and how these like people walking randomly on the beach could suddenly like cross through these structures and stay inside. Selected, unbuilt, too heavy. 60 tons, it's nothing. Anyway. That was in Chicago, private client who owned a beautiful townhouse in red here, and in the urban regulation allows the owner of the land to actually build as high as the neighbor, and so it was like, and the land is, I can't remember, but it's like 6 meter or 5 meter wide. It's like tiny, and so he said, like, guys, what can you do for us? So I was thinking, okay, so question, he wants to make money, obviously. So let's try to like saturate that kind of building envelope and see what we can do. And and also doing something. Introducing what I was talking about, like mixing communities, people, so mixing typologies here, having like different types of like flat or duplex or like a narrow, deep apartments. So introducing this like variation on top of each other, a car park, and so on. That works. And also that the constraint of being in such narrow site was interesting in terms of typologies and how actually you get light and so on. The client sold the land for like $10 million. Competition about a gate for a small town in Sweden. They want to like regenerate a public park, and they wanted to attract the public, and said that we need to create boundaries and gates. Anyway, but I found the idea kind of like paradoxical when you have like an open space and you want to create gates to actually close the park, and so I found it strange. And so instead of like creating gates, we've decided to actually explore how a gate could actually, instead of separating people, could bring people together, and instead of being just like a passage, it could be a place where people could stay. And also a place which could be built in time. It's not necessarily, okay, the project is over, but the project could be built according to the success of the idea. So we're developing this kind of like grid, which were like very simple recycled timber platforms. And the idea was actually that kind of like system could grow and spread and sprawl according to the success of the place, as I was saying. Deep slab, yeah. How am I doing with time? I'm good with time? Yeah? Yeah? Right, okay. Deep slab, yeah. I was kind of like very interested by the you know this plan? No, it's a plan of a castle in Scotland, 14th century castle, and the thickness of the walls actually are so it's a courtyard in the middle, and it's a castle like not to look just rich, but to protect yourself, and so the walls are like so thick, so massive. They're able to incorporate like small rooms and circulation systems, and it's pretty incredible, this idea of like living inside a wall, pretty much, or inside material. So I'm like, okay, maybe we can do something with this idea of actually exploring just like the solid and carving the solid to create like living spaces, and. So starting even like in a very simple way of a slab, and how it could create a housing apartment or a typology of like a place where people can actually live, and seeing it's everything is kind of integrated in the slab. There is no real need for like partitions. And pushing the idea of having something which has no partition, we can imagine having the walls like transparent, or there are lots of like narcissistic people around, so I'm sure it would be interesting to sometimes like see the neighbors or see yourself in mirrors, and having this kind of like continuous space. And so yeah, the idea was like rooms are become only like cavities in the floor, and you've got this new relationship with the city and new relationship with the neighbors potentially, or with yourself, because it's all like mirrored or transparent. Perfect for selfies and narcissistic stuff. Bus shelter, yeah, okay, I'm going to skip. Yeah, that's, yeah, City of Sydney, they organized like a little competition for a bus shelter, and that was using public spaces. Trees in Sydney are pretty like on like in the CBD, in like really like business district, pretty rare. So the idea was like to explore, like to do like 3D scan the trees, explore like a specific geometry using the trees to actually create something which could be suspended, and just create like a notion of space for a bus shelter. I know, crazy. We were talking about this building yesterday. So, some projects are weird. That's what I was saying in the beginning, and I like the weird stuff. It's a hotel in the first place, built, designed by Harry Seidler, Australian architect, and it's been selected by Thomas Dement. It's a German artist who is exhibited at the Venice Biennale as we speak at the moment, and he picked this place to organize, to install his work. And in parallel, there was an exhibition organized as well in relation to Thomas Dement's exhibition. And I was so, like many people, interested by the plan of this, so unique of the building, and how to create this relationship with someone exhibiting one level above and us exhibiting downstairs. How through the layout of the building we could relate these two moments. And actually that was really highlighting the geometry of the space, and kind of echoing the plan of the levels above into the space, the underground space. So building a very simple 3D model where we understand the partitioning and the spatial structure of the building, and replicating it. Of course, budget was $10, and the time was 2 hours. So just rolls and lasers, we managed to install and recreate what's the spatial structure of the levels above within that kind of such a weird space here. But that was it. Competition for this was in Japan. Can't remember which city, but anyway, the brief was about designing a landmark for what could be a landmark today. I think that was the question, and kind of open brief, and what can we celebrate, and how to address ecological questions through a landmark. And so the idea was to have, instead of celebrating a place, we were thinking that could be a bit more interesting to celebrate actions or behavior or political decisions. And so the idea was to develop a kind of floating or geostationary, we say that? Geostationary? Something with hovering, or geostationary inflated structure which could move around the world and actually fly above the city, which does the best actions in relation to carbon footprint and sustainability and stuff like that. And this inflated structure actually behaves according to natural and local conditions, like weather, atmospheric pressure, water, ocean tides and stuff like this. So that kind of inflating and inflating according to the context. I'm going to skip this one because I've got so many slides. I think that's a transition with the next topic. Events. So organizing events, and that was for the university I was teaching for, organizing like large urban events with very like little money as well, and how to exhibit and curate work, installation. No, I don't want to download this now. Thank you. Academia, yes. So that was a kind of like transition project. Academia, you know, it's as I really believe that architecture happens most of the time in schools. Sadly, not only, but sadly, like real questions, explorations, fearless approaches. That's a good place where people can think in. We can be critical about it, but that's pretty crucial to actually embrace these moments of collaborations as well with the institutions. So I'm going to show quickly some projects where like the way I teach is also like very much based on developing a very strong design process. So I'm going to do this quickly because I'm here also to talk about more specific topic. Second year students, great, and also introducing like when I was talking about processes, introducing like new ways or like digital techniques to actually understand, map out cities or understand movements, and so it's here with like a metal steel dust to like simulate circulation patterns and how it could be used as data into to projects. And in schools, we have time and energy to actually investigate these questions. So that would be a shame not to do it. I'm going to show this very quickly. Second year students, I'm always amazed. Yeah, and also I'm interested in the like digital tools and in education as well, and in practice and in research as well, and using precedents as well to understand them and manipulate them, and that's the CCTV building, and students had to understand how they're organized, how they sit in the city, and what the purpose they have, and reshuffle the structure to produce something else using parametric techniques of like formal manipulation. That's third year. Right. It's a transition between education now, like academia, and research, which is like the third chapter of this talk. Being between Paris and Sydney, that was easier for me to actually generate something in Sydney about the city of Paris. And also, the city of Paris was interested in having, and I'm grateful to them for this, was interested in having some kind of like young blood or fresh air from people living on the other side of the world, thinking about a different city and how it could be implemented. So it started with actually workshops. So I created a master studio in Sydney, and we were at the Palais Tokyo, which is like an amazing place for like workshops, and actually implementing projects over there and presenting in front of the city of Paris, stakeholders, people involved in the like public transportation systems, and that was pretty serious in the way they were like responding to us. So like it happened over like 3 times, like 3 years in a row. And each time it was actually understanding what the city of Paris was actually expecting. 1 year it was the question of density. And maybe I should explain something before. 6 years ago, the Society of the Grand Paris has been created. Okay, so Paris has a very clear boundary with a ring road around it, and we've got this, like any city or most of the cities, these gigantic outskirts, and it's all like a patch of big or small cities, and there is a political intention of creating the Greater London, creating the Greater Paris. And that's where this idea of actually organizing academia and research around this question of how can we speculate as architect and academic around this idea of what's next for Paris, for the 21st century. And so of course there are plenty of architects, architects commissioned to develop strategies around the future, but at the same time, and that's kind of between us, it's no one, in my opinion, was really exploring something a bit more radical about what could be done. It's very and that's important. I'm spending some time explaining this because it's important. And politicians, I've got nothing against them, but when you have 60 cities around the table and how to bring people together agreeing around an idea, it's pretty difficult for pure political reasons. And usually the decision process leads to an average decision leading to an average decision. It's like a sum of average decisions, and the project becomes average. So that was a good way for the city of Paris to keep that a level of radicality in the public debate. So 1 year it was developing idea about density and pushing the idea of extreme density. So exploring, for instance, how a typical Haussmannian block could be densify, and as you may probably know, the city of Paris is super dense in terms of inhabitants per square kilometer, and the idea was how could we explore this and relate this idea of density by actually sinking these courtyards, which are inside the typical Haussmannian blocks, and connect them to the very dense metro, so subway network system. The year after was so that's a good example. That's the existing Paris peripheric, the ring road around Paris. And a couple of years ago, there is this new ring road which has been completed here. It's another gigantic circle. It's pretty much like a highway, and so it's kind of a new boundary. Around Paris. And the question was how can we try to speculate on the future of these main highways which were leading to the first ring road? So what's about this gigantic in between these ring roads? So a very large scale speculation with the students, and we all together we managed to actually develop strategies to reorganize these highways and how to slow down and how actually to introduce in the political reflection other criteria rather than just speed, pollution, and public housing, and more about landscape and crossing and communities and reprogramming, which was actually planned in the first place, and developing notions of urban porosity as well, what you see, what you can actually appreciate according to different speeds, creating density points, creating sequences of like curating the way you're going to approach a city, actually, in terms of density. And also managing ways of crossing, because it's obvious, but these highways are like massive cuts in cities, and how actually you can, by like twisting geometries, you can cross and create like intensity moments in this urban experience. So that all these like topological moves from like lanes to another to actually create something rather interesting and dense at the same time. It's not like trying to, Paris, it's a very conservative city. Damn, seriously. And most of the time, and it happens like every year, like public projects, and it's obsessed with this idea of like Paris, the city of light. Paris has to be the postcard, and it's kind of interesting when you actually can embrace and not being afraid of like a real urban condition as well. It's like, okay, I love Paris, but it's different now. So instead of recreating these like kind of like golden age of I don't know what, really understanding what urban condition is. And so that's maybe some of you teach or students or whatever, or are planning to teach or study. But time is precious, so it's interesting when you can actually align academia and research, actually, and doing like exploring the same topic. Like otherwise, you'll need I don't know, like several lives. So as a research agenda in relation with the city of Paris, there was this collaboration between us and the Atelier du Grand Paris, which is that kind of institution thinking about the future. So it's the city of Paris. And they were interested in having some ideas about train stations. I know. Why train stations? Because I was talking about this large table. It's really like a physical, massive table with 60 people sitting around, disagreeing with each other, wearing ties. And so the only like common decision or common denominator was, yeah, okay, we agree with each other only about public transport. And having train station, it's great. You agree, you agree, you agree. Okay. So the project for the Greater Paris started, and it's starting actually, with recreating so that's the historical Paris, Paris itself here in gray, and the colored line are, so that's the Seine River, of course, but this colored line is this new network of trains and subway lines with 68 new train stations around Paris. And we were asked, like, guys, are you excited about like thinking about train stations and stuff? Like, yeah, for sure. And so the point was to, I'm showing this image. It's not on site, but it's a kind of very clear illustration of how most of the time networks work. You know, you've got like this bridge for the cars and trucks, you've got the bridge for the pedestrians, you've got the street for the cars, and the interface between these networks is dysfunctional, or it's not even thought after. So that was one thing about this, and the experience of networks, transportation networks, usually they are very clear at their interfaces. You know, it's like when you're a highway, no problem, but you want to swap from a network system to another one, that's where you understand its quality or its issues. So we were interested to in these like moments of how things fit together. Scary. And also, no, don't throw chairs, it's not my work. Avoiding this evil thing, which is, it's actually a project, it's one of the 68 train stations planned for the Greater Paris. And so why avoiding this? Because that kind of like typical, okay, I'm not sure, shouldn't get angry, but that kind of like typical like 19th century representation of a public building in a very clear like figure-ground relationship, an object in the middle of a public space, and that kind of like monofunctional object in the middle of a public space. So things are like very like separated pretty much. And also, okay, at the very least we have like shops in the train station. And so this, okay, how like networks work together and how to avoid that kind of like very sad experience actually. And it's, I think it's always like a missed opportunity to spend some serious money on 68 train stations and create like very like banal experiences on like public spaces and social interaction. So it led us to like develop this idea of hybrid environments, and like, skipping the words. They are the keywords. I'm going to maybe not talk about all this, but skipping the only way we could, or like most of the projects have been addressed, like this is architecture, this is the public space, this is the landscaped area, and this is the train station or transportation networks. And rethinking actually the relationships between all these fields like architecture and landscape and transportation, and how actually make sure that the boundaries between these like four questions are crumbles pretty much, or they can merge together, and how they merge together. So I'm not sure if because it could go a bit like technical about like the merging process or the hybridization process. But we really wanted to like deliver something which is which could work. Of course, it's a test run and it's experimental. But that was this idea of so we like set up that kind of like decision process with the key moments at like multiple scale, and of course multiple scale. And which like started with understanding like local conditions and really creating a like bottom-up decision process instead of that kind of like, sorry, I'm insisting on top-down stuff. Like that's where that thing go. Yeah, and so it's kind of like family portraits, which we can. Well, they're not my family, but. Actually, one is, but no. Yeah, that kind of like family portrait summarizes the key idea of actually how you can assemble things together. And you've got this like cubist portrait where it's like all fragmented and voluntary, like it's a clear decision about like fragmenting things. Dr. Frankenstein's creature, where actually there is this hybrid creature made of like body parts, dead body parts. But at the same time, so it's a new guy, but at the same time, you understand through the scars on his face and body, you can say, okay, that top of like the left ear comes from this dead guy, the nose it's very clear how things have been assembled. On the right, it's a morphing of a human being, a snake, and a lion. Okay, it's Daniel Lee, artist, who did this. He's got a series of portraits, and it's really interrogating the way the part to whole relationship. You know, how like parts, how they merge together. Do we want to see scars or like clear boundaries, or we on the right, it's difficult to, it's impossible to understand where the snake is, and we can see the snake, we can see the man, we can see the lion maybe, but it's impossible to understand like where it happens. How you shift from one DNA to another one. Okay, so it's like really going down into a very like simple components, and that was the kind of approach we wanted to take. Like break down architecture to like its simple components, break down like landscape questions to its original components, and with these components like reassemble them to the to the DNA core. Stephen Hall, I love this guy, but it's not this. You know, it's like here it's like mixing typologies together, but you can still, okay, that's a high-rise building, and then there is a bridge crossing. So it's mixing high-rise and bridge. Great, but it's not what we wanted to explore. And the idea was to explore, like, I'm not sure if, no, actually it's impossible to see. Right, that's great. Okay, the resolution of the projector is not high enough to show the pattern actually. I mean, you can see maybe at the top these like samples, and actually it's kind of like a conceptual image. I'm sorry, but if it's a bit, yeah, no, I'm not sorry actually. So it's kind of like conceptual image, how you move from a type of pattern to another one, to another one, to another one in a kind of like continuous move, and how this pattern is able to incorporate diversity instead of like showing these like scars I was talking about before. And if we had to remain in that kind of like surgery context or field, it's really the core of our investigation was how do you call this, connective tissue. You know, in the body, you've got this like connective tissue between like muscles and things, and so that was really much the core of the project. How can we design this? No readings, no readings. Is it too long? Doing okay? Okay. So it started with understanding local conditions, and also local conditions. Most of the time, it's not nice, or it's not easy. It's not nice. It's much more based on conflicts. I'm going back to this slide. Conflicts. Okay, things don't work together. People hate each other. People are nasty. Spaces are left over. You know, sometimes it's a big mess, and but it's life. You know, so we wanted to like really understand this and collect and organize data about how people live, what is missing, some kind of like generic questions as well, but also like some very specific questions about how can we make sure that a place is activated all the time, and how can we create a like very strong and rich experience for users. Okay. If I go back, the original brief is let's design a train station, which is going to be open from like 6 a.m. until midnight, and the rest of the time it's dead and it's nothing. And so we kind of like moved away from this idea of having yes it's going to be a train station, or yes we're going to be able to catch a train there, but it's not only that. It's going to be like a new collective space, a new landscape, new programs, and hopefully like bring programs and idea together. I'm not sure if I'm going to go to the detail of how we are suggesting to operate, but okay, briefly, it's like we were using a digital like model, like a model and a model in like both sense, to create that kind of like scaffold of vector forces. And this, I'm going back here. These vector forces could be programs, existing circulation systems, topography, missing programs, maybe I said that already, landscape opportunities, and how this site, which is that kind of like L-shape thing, becomes that kind of like crossing point, crossing of programs, crossing of circulation systems, crossing of landscapes, crossing of urban fabrics, which are like sometimes very different, social conditions, you know, of course, very French, you know, it's like city number 1 wants the train station, city number 2 wants the train station, city number 3 wants the city. Where is the train station? Okay, right here. So like it's bad for everybody. So, but at the same time, instead of saying it's bad for everybody, that becomes the place where like the 4 cities are going to meet. And most of the time, the urban fabric is quite different from one city to another. I'm going as quickly as possible. And so based on this digital model, like a simulation of this, like how one scaffold can bring all these like forces together from landscape, from circulation pattern, from subterranean as well, because it's also a train station, and how it could generate and create this enhanced experience for all users. So briefly, we've got these like little diagrams here showing the different from left to right. I can't read, so I'm going to remember. Goes to like circulation, pedestrians, cars, landscape, programs, private programs, housing opportunities, and also topography, how we can create like literally a new urban landscape. So we extracted some samples of what we could do, and understand how they work like in 3 dimensions. So one image. So we're like far away from the like train station I was showing before, but it's actually creating, so that's the platform of the train station itself, and that's an image which is actually like showing the layering, like how the different programs and populations meet, or actually how the project can encourage people to actually do multiple things in the same place itself, and how it becomes a new artificial ground. And programming every surface was also like something important in order to activate everything, like a kind of like operative ground. So like sectional drawings, and that's it. Thank you very much.